Hello everyone, this is AndresRestart, and today we are talking about Xenoblade Genesis, or actually should I say, Project Legacy, or actually should I say, that ultra-secret, epic, new IP that's based off a fantasy medieval world with action elements that Nintendo and Monolith Soft have been working on since very early on to the Switch 1 generation. Guess what? It's all the same thing. That's what it looks like. We have some confirmation at least that leak of Project Legacy that I've been talking about for quite some time, because based off all the other codename leaks from Midori, they've all been proving true. That this one was also likely true, the next big Monolith Soft title. We actually have very, very strong evidence that essentially confirms this to be the case. And so today what we're doing is talking about that evidence, talking about this game, talking about the Xenoblade 1, 2, and 3 Switch 2 editions as well, and what it suggests about Xenoblade Genesis, by the way. Very big deal, actually. And just explaining how this game is way bigger, way cooler than a lot of people have been thinking. Like, yeah, when I saw the trailer the first time, to be honest with you, my first thought was, very much like Xenoblade Chronicles 2 when I first saw the trailer for that back in 2017. Even though I was already a huge Xenoblade fan then, because I loved the Xenoblade Chronicles 1, one of my favorite games ever. Xenoblade Chronicles X, we were fresh off that, and that was amazing on the Wii U. I was so hyped for Xenoblade Chronicles 2, but the way it was presented, the way it was shown, I didn't feel great about it. But now, years later, to me, Xenoblade Chronicles 2 is actually my personal favorite in the series. I know that may seem weird to some, but my point here is that this isn't the first time we've seen the first Xenoblade trailer, the first trailer for a game made by Monolith Soft, and at first, maybe people don't quite realize just how great or big of a deal it actually is, but as we're going to learn more, as we dive deeper, as eventually we get more trailers and discover more about this game, I think people are going to realize how big of a deal it is. But looking through everything I've noticed so far, I actually find myself extremely excited, because I've been diving deeper into this, and quite frankly, I think this might be Monolith Soft's best game yet, at least in terms of scope and ambition. They're going for some really cool things here that have me extremely excited, and I do think more people should be paying attention to this. And by the way, I don't think you should be looking at this as another Xenoblade Chronicles game. Yes, I know the title is Xenoblade Genesis, but there's a difference in titling there, and I think it's different for a reason. And so yes, we have a lot to get into this time. But first, here's a brief message. Do you find yourself feeling tired, unable to take a good nap during the day from wherever you may be? Then perhaps you are in need of a soft, comfortable sleep mask that blocks out all light. Fortunately, Meant to Sleep, the sponsor for today's video, has just that, a quality sleep mask. This sleep mask has super soft, comfy cushions that cover your eyes and block out all light. It's easy to adjust to different sizes, and it feels great to wear, and it's helped me personally fit in just a bit more rest during my days. And signing up now might just be the perfect time to enjoy the summer night sale between June 19th through July 15th to save up to 20% off. So if you're looking to improve your sleep and energy, check out the Meant to Sleep mask using the link in the description below with my code SLEEPRESTART. Okay, so quickly summarizing the Xenoblade Chronicles 1, 2, and 3 Switch 2 editions. I'm happy about this. I've been waiting for this. We're going to be getting them at higher resolutions with improved frame rate at 60 FPS. These games have been needing them, especially Xenoblade Chronicles 2. They look great based off the footage, and we're going to be getting them in the coming months. Wonderful. Xenoblade Chronicles 1 Definitive Edition, that's already available. The crazy thing, though, is that they're not just getting performance enhancements and resolution enhancements here, but actually each one's getting new content. We now have Xenoblade 1 cart. And that's hilarious, but also very interesting. I've been seeing different people play it. I haven't downloaded it yet because I've been busy, but that's really cool that they're doing stuff like this. But I think it's important to keep these things in mind, because I wouldn't be surprised if some of these things are actually used as a bit of a testing ground for Xenoblade Genesis. So just keep that in mind. You'll understand why a little bit later. But let's just straight up jump into the conversation about Xenoblade Genesis. So the Xenoblade Japanese website, or the Twitter page, had some different things that they pointed out, so I'll read them here. The stage of Xenoblade Genesis is the vast world of Anshar, which has 6 suns. Even those who have not played the Xenoblade series before can enjoy Xenoblade Genesis starting from here. Here it's also said, following the conclusion of the Xenoblade series, that's right, the conclusion of the Xenoblade series, a new chapter begins with Xenoblade Genesis. Just like the Xenoblade series, the general director is Monolith Soft's Takayashiki Takahashi. So a few things to keep in mind about the title Xenoblade Genesis. It no longer has Chronicles in the name, and this I think is important because it's suggestive of a big shift in the series here. The Klaus trilogy ended with Future Redeemed, the expansion to Xenoblade Chronicles 3. And so that whole trilogy is done. This is not Xenoblade Chronicles 4. Some people are calling this Xenoblade Chronicles 4. It's not. There's also Xenoblade Chronicles X. But even with Xenoblade Chronicles X, that is Xenoblade Chronicles X. The Chronicles series appears to be entirely done. This is something new. And so while it is still keeping the Xenoblade name, they are moving ahead in a different direction. This is effectively the new IP. And I'll be circling back to that in a moment, but let's first focus on the other part to the name, Genesis. So Genesis means the origin, creation, or beginning of something. It's kind of hard to totally understand what they are getting at here by calling this Genesis. Is this like the beginning of all of Xenoblade? I think it's one of those things where we're going to have to play through the game and figure that out, because maybe you could look at this as something that kind of takes place before every other Xenoblade game. But considering the story of the Xenoblade games, what we know, there was a civilization that was more advanced than the typical human race, and here it's a very different style, very different kind of environment. This is not taking place on something like Earth or Earth. This is something very, very different. And so I'm not sure if the Genesis part is to suggest that this is something that takes place before all prior Xenoblade games. It could mean more so like a new beginning, which does make sense. Monolith Soft and Nintendo have been on the Xenoblade Chronicles series for quite some time now. That appears to be done, and the Genesis part to this could simply mean a new beginning for Xenoblade without the Chronicles name. This is a shift. This is something different. It still carries a lot of the elements from the Xenoblade series that you may have come to love, but this is something else. But now, let me go back to this idea of it being a new IP. It's still Xenoblade, so I guess technically it's not a new IP, but it is a changed IP, because it's not Xenoblade Chronicles, it's Xenoblade. So it's a little different. And we do know that Monolith Soft had hiring pages up on their website early on to the Switch 1 era, where they were looking for talent to work on a fantasy medieval new IP with action elements. And we saw a bit of these pieces of art here. And what's interesting is that when we take a look at some of the elements we've seen in the Xenoblade Genesis trailer, there's a lot of similarity there. Those are bits of recruitment art, so we can't expect it to look exactly the same, but there's clearly some strong similarities here. It may be the case that they've actually been working on this game for pretty much the entire Switch 1 era. Now, of course, Monolith Soft has several different studios. They do a lot of support work for other Nintendo games such as Splatoon, Animal Crossing, and The Legend of Zelda. They might even have a hand in the Ocarina of Time Reborn or remake. And then, of course, they've been making all the different Xenoblade games and then the Switch 2 editions and all that different stuff. So they've been busy, probably not all hands on deck for this project for like the last 8 years or so, but perhaps they've been slowly building up to this, and in recent years, they've been developing in earnest, more focused on getting this out at a reasonable time early on to Switch 2 generation. And perhaps there's even been some shifts. As years would pass, they could make different decisions, go in slightly different directions, which is why this is now Xenoblade Genesis as opposed to just something else. Now let's get to what I'm calling the confirmation that this is indeed Project Legacy, which I think is important because Legacy would be a very different codenaming scheme compared to all the other Xenoblade games that have to do with little folk or titan folk or big folk or space stuff when we talk about Xenoblade Chronicles X. Very different naming scheme, more in line with speaking to having a legacy, having to do with lineages and honor. Things more fitting for a high fantasy or medieval kind of like world, which is what we're seeing from the trailer. So if you go frame by frame here, where they're running through this beautiful forest, by the way, you'll see, as I go frame by frame, right here for just a few short frames, there's a little bit of text that shows. And in this text it says, Legacy. So this was not intended to be in the trailer. It's a slip up, most likely. I mean, maybe they left it there on purpose for for those eagle-eyed viewers to hear confirmation of Project Legacy. It's possible, but regardless, we're seeing that Legacy is being used as what appears to be the code name for this project. This is something that would be suggestive of how they have it listed in their databases here, Monolith Soft. And so, yeah, this is probably about as close as confirmation we're going to get until we get a data mine for this game after it comes out, if that even happens. Yeah, this is almost certainly Project Legacy, the game we've been talking about for a few years now. But let me now just kind of go through the trailer here and sort of talk about how big of a deal this game is. Now, as I stated earlier, when I first saw the footage, the visuals, I wasn't actually extremely impressed by it. I was actually a little bit taken back by the art style. If you look here, you can almost see kind of black outlines for a lot of the stuff, and I'm not necessarily a big fan of that. They're definitely going for that very animated look, and I don't necessarily like seeing those big outlines. And I was kind of hoping they're going to go for a little bit more realism with all this extra horsepower. However, something to consider here, and maybe some people might think of this as a little bit annoying, but very similar to Mario Kart World and Donkey Kong Bonanza, now that we understand that this is most likely the project they were working on early on to Switch 1 era, Project Legacy, all likely being the same thing. This may have started off as a Switch 1 title, and so there could be some artifacts there. Listen, both Mario Kart World and Donkey Kong Bonanza, I would say, are pretty awesome looking, really fun games, but do I feel they're taking full advantage of the Switch 2 hardware? No. But also, in general, this is kind of the case for most games early on in a generation. They're not going to be fully taking advantage of the hardware. And I think something else to consider here is that this game's not coming out until 2027, so it's had extra time to be prepared for the Switch 2. So we may find that they're actually still doing some impressive things. I'm simply noting that from what we understand, this may have started off as a Switch 1 title as well, but that doesn't mean they can't end up doing some really impressive things here. And the more and more I do more closely examine this trailer, I start to more and more realize just how big of a deal it is what we're looking at here. Let's just take this into consideration. This is very scaled back. Where the camera is right now is super pulled back right now. There's a whole giant, city here, and just look how small it is. You can literally see all these different buildings, many of which you may be able to walk into and explore. There's an entire, what appears to be arena right here, or something like that. This is pretty big. If you think about it in relation to other Xenoblade towns and cities, this one appears to be pretty sizable. This would be one of the bigger ones, and this is just a small piece to everything we're seeing here. And by the way, everything we're seeing here is just a small piece to the entire world. So let's just keep that in mind. This is way scaled back here. And what's interesting is that looking at the backgrounds, the perspective may seem a bit odd. And this kind of gives us a little bit of a better understanding. We can see a boat out in the middle of the ocean. And just think about that for a moment. There may actually be sailing the open seas here, expansive oceans. But just kind of look at this, right? This is weird. Typically with Xenoblade games, there's some sort of spectacle. In prior Xenoblade games, like Chronicles games, they would have these giant titans you'd be looking at off in the distance that you can explore. And so, showing off this giant expanse off into the distance, considering this is Xenoblade, yeah, we're going to be able to explore all of this. But what's kind of mind-bending about this is that we're looking at continents, provinces, giant regions here that are in the sky. And so, the more and more I look at this footage, the more and more I come to realize what we're looking at here might be a giant sphere. They designed an entire world, or it could be a giant cylinder, hard to say exactly. It's in the sky, so imagine it like this. Imagine a giant sphere, but you're inside the giant sphere, not on the outside how we kind of explore our Earth, right? But imagine if we lived on the inside and we explored the ceiling of everything, right? That's kind of how this appears to me. Maybe it's not a giant perfect sphere, but that's what this kind of looks like here. And so maybe we can get up here, right? And we look up and we'll see this part off into the distance in the sky, because that's how this world is shaped. And what's so crazy about that is I can't think of any game in existence that has ever presented a world in this way. This is entirely unique. And what we're looking at here is absolutely massive. This might just be the biggest Nintendo game ever made. Monolith Soft has helped out with the Zelda games. Breath and Tears have huge worlds, but then you also have Xenoblade Chronicles X, massive, massive world. what I think we're looking at here could just be on a whole other level, and like it's being designed as an entire world. Like we're seeing this ocean, we're seeing this ship here, which I am led to think we'll be able to actually use to cross. We think about Xenoblade Chronicles 2, you had these giant titans that were kind of like the regions you would explore, and you wouldn't actually be able to sail to each one. It looks like in this case, they will let you sail to each area, which just sort of expands upon just how vast this is. Now, I'm making that assumption based off this boat here, but considering the switch to hardware and what we're going to be more capable of now, I think that seems like a pretty big likelihood. Nothing too special about this scene, but here I think we kind of see more of what I'm sort of speaking to, a more close-up shot of the world where we see these giant crazy structures here. And while, yeah, they're going for more of that animated look, it still looks pretty cool. Like, you look at all the blades of grass here, like, up close, there's still, like, pretty good detail, which I think is neat. But it's not just, like, look, there's wind blowing, right? But we see the leaves being pushed. So this could be a strong hint that there's going to be some more impressive atmospheric weather effects in the world, far beyond what we've seen from prior Xenoblade games. Maybe something more along the lines of what we saw in Breath and Tears, actually, the Zelda games. Here we see actually that town from earlier, but a lot closer up, and so you can see, like, this is actually like a well-designed city with a lot of stuff here. There's so much going on in terms of detail and just people and objects everywhere. So yeah, I think they're designing something that's just on a whole other scale here, and that's crazy. This is another town. This possibly could be the same town, but it appears very different to me. Now, I'm just going to kind of skip through some stuff here. Here are 5 of the 6 suns. You see that there up in the sky there, which is interesting. Like, I'm very curious how this is going to look. So there is kind of like a space, right? So, and that's what's kind of confusing about this, because we've seen other parts where it's not like space. Like, we're seeing in the sky, like ocean and provinces we can explore. So where do we look up where the stars are? I haven't figured that out quite yet, but clearly this is a massive, massive world. Here's kind of like some of that medieval fight scenes, which I think sort of speaks to that bit of art we talked about earlier from the hiring post many years ago. I actually like the look of some of these scenes here. We're seeing some really cool special attacks, some cool lighting effects here. And I think once we actually see the combat system, it's going to be very interesting. But that's actually kind of one of the big things about this. We're seeing some cutscenes here where they're doing some really cool flashy attacks. I assume this is kind of early on to the game because there's some sort of academy here. I think this is just going to be kind of like the inciting incident that brings the party together, and then they explore the entire giant massive world. Not too different from like Xenoblade Chronicles 3, for example. But I think what's cool is that they actually haven't revealed the combat system yet, and I think that's actually important. They gave us a pretty decent-sized trailer, and still they didn't show off the combat system because it's no longer Xenoblade Chronicles X, and we also considering those hiring posts, how they were hiring for an action kind of game. This may have a different style of combat, and I'm very excited to see what that is. They are keeping it under wraps for now, because I think it's probably going to be a big surprise when they actually show it off. So something to keep in mind here, they're being a little secretive, likely for a big reason. Now, I think this is one of the important characters in the game. There's something here that happens. So they have these anima cry stones. They're, I guess, important to their abilities and such. But if you look here, if for a moment you're going to see something that looks almost like a Monado. And so, like, a lot of the main characters get this sort of symbol in their weapons for different Xenoblade games. I think this is probably something very similar to that. So it's just something to keep in mind here. This is probably one of the main characters, like, if maybe it's her and someone else, but yeah, definitely there's something going on with that. And also, she's an elf, which is interesting and is kind of speaking to this fantasy direction. Some people kind of thought, oh, this might be like a Fire Emblem Three Houses Xenoblade game. No, maybe the beginning may feel a little bit like that, but that's just not how Xenoblade games are. You're not going to be sticking to one hub area. Like, this is going to be a giant open world to explore, it looks like, and if anything, we should be taking this to mean that the interiors of the different buildings we explore are actually going to be pretty detailed. What we're seeing here for this area is pretty detailed, and I think that looks nice. But looking here, this is where we saw the leak of the project name Legacy, but just kind of actually focusing on the woods, like you can see the fog, right? You can see a really dense forest, or here, like you look all the flowers, the dense grass. Like, this is dense stuff. There's a lot of foliage here. And here we can also see, like I said, the different provinces in the background. There's an ocean that's like in the sky. So again, it's kind of has me wondering, where are the stars, right? Maybe this isn't like actually like a giant sphere as I've been theorizing, but more like a cylinder. I did mention that, but like I almost kind of feel like I see the curvature. If we continue, it's just going to kind of naturally flow into that environment if we just kind of move forward there. Yeah, like this actually, like there's a lot of big density going on here. It's very cool stuff. But here's something else that's very interesting. We're seeing mounts. And I think this actually speaks to what I'm getting at here for the size of this game. They feel the need to add mounts now, finally, and like I'm just looking at this footage, it looks great. There's an enemy off there to a distance we'll likely be able to battle, but also notice that, again, they're not really allowing us to see that because they're keeping the combat system under wraps right now. But because we have mounts here, I think that does really strongly suggest that, yeah, this is going to be a really big world where mounts are going to be a lot more necessary, unlike prior Xenoblade games. But that brings me to this Xenoblade 1 cart where they put out this big update. They may have been exploring around with the idea of putting mounts into Xenoblade games, and so that's what led to the new content in Xenoblade Chronicles 1, because they wanted to test things out for Xenoblade Genesis here. So just kind of something interesting to think about there, and I think this looks cool. Like there's like even kind of like this blur effect that's going on because of how fast they're going. So there's just actually a lot of really cool visual effects once you take a moment to take a deeper look at what's going on. But here's also something that might hint at a more involved combat system than before. Notice this creature, right? It even has like red sparks on it, so it might be kind of enraged. There's actually a chain going around it, so that could, maybe that's what's causing it to be enraged there. But it has this giant horn, right? And then she comes in, powers up, slashes, and the horn is now cut clean off. And so in this game, there may be some level of destruction or damage that we visibly see on enemies, which I can't seem to remember being the case with prior Xenoblade games. So this could be a suggestion of extra levels of detail there, which is very cool. And actually, I'm just saying, okay, this is actually insane. It's not just the creature. Look, she slashed through the rock. So potentially, this might be the real big mind-blowing part. You can see the horn right there, by the way. Maybe you can even collect these materials like that, like physical objects to collect, unlike just like random orbs. Could the environment also be destructible? Like clearly this is a cutscene. But could this world be so immersive, so involved and interactive that they create an open world that has destructible environments where we can literally slash through rocks like this? That's crazy. Even for the sake of the cutscene, this is crazy, just like a really cool demonstration of her slashing power there. It's extremely impressive. So something to keep in mind. This is a cutscene here, so it's not actually a demonstration of the combat system. But, oh, that's a cool power. He's actually like summoning like a hand from the ground. So that's very cool too. And this scene here, we see someone riding a dragon, which I think is awesome. And I speculate, keep in mind, it's not the first time we've seen a dragon flying in Xenoblade, so it doesn't necessarily mean that we can fly the dragons, but it at least has me wondering, what if we can? Considering the scale of the world here, that seems to be the largest Xenoblade world, or perhaps Nintendo world ever, they may want to have some flying. Like, considering that Monolith Soft, we've actually found out from interviews, was heavily involved with a lot of the design choices for the gameplay in Tears of the Kingdom, and how that has such a huge focus on sky exploration, and also Xenoblade Chronicles X has a huge sky exploration focus. Is it really a stretch to think, now that they're including mounts in this game, that eventually we can also unlock flying mounts as well, where we can fly on giant, epic, bird, weird, feathery dragons? Like, that honestly seems really plausible when you consider the scale of the world and how it's very curved inwards, right? Like a reverse sphere, as I'm saying, or at least we're inside of a giant sphere, it almost looks like. It might make even more sense to be able to fly around like this, because you can fly around and fly up to get to other areas. So there's just a lot of crazy potential here I'm seeing with the gameplay. Really cool visual effects there. I think, honestly, this looks good the more and more I look at it. And something else people have noticed is that there isn't like the typical demonstration of other types of common species from other Xenoblade games. So these are like different species, like we're seeing like elves and whatever this cat creature is. There's been no pawn or anything like that. Or mechanical people, not in the same way. So this is definitely something different. This is not Xenoblade Chronicles, this is a new Xenoblade something, and I'm sure it's still going to have the amazing music, the amazing story, the vast, beautiful worlds, and as I've been trying to argue throughout this entire video, I think we are looking at perhaps the biggest Nintendo game in terms of world ever. And that's crazy. Xenoblade Genesis, Project Legacy, that new IP that's not actually a new IP, but kind of is because it's no longer Chronicles. Yeah, this is a big deal, everyone. Get hyped. Stop underestimating this game. This is going to be one of the biggest deals of 2027. So stick around, subscribe if you haven't already, because this is not the last time we'll be talking about Xenoblade Genesis, but of course I'll be talking about other Nintendo things as well. Let me know what you all think in the comments below, and I'll see you all really soon. Take care. Bye. And don't forget, you can use my code SLEEPRESTART when checking the link in the description below for the Manta Sleep Mask.